the ducks were lining up. But I knew that I had the support of a lot of people locally, but and they were sort of sick of it. They were sick of it, and they didn't feel that anybody was doing anything, or they weren't being heard. In fact, one of the women who runs a business here said they just felt they weren't being heard. So in a way, it's a bit of a combo of we made our own luck, and then from that roll other things. So, for example, in January last year, there was absolutely nothing happened. There were 3 members of our group this time last year. I remember coming down to Learner Festival and looking at everybody going, oh, God, how can we ever do anything about this? But, I was thinking about how we can get some branding up, how can we let people know there is a residents group. That was the key thing. There's a business group, business association, but there wasn't a residents group. So my key focus at the time was to be involved in getting a residents group up. So that's when I started getting opportunities to meet with people, because I realised the thing that turns people off, and still does, is poor information. Once you tell people that all about a supervised injecting centre, the key facts, there aren't any deaths, it's all about rehabilitation, it cleans up the amenity, it saves emergency services, it saves money, people sort of go, oh, okay, right, as opposed to all the fear-mongering and, attracts heaps of drug users, well, they're already here. So what we found was education, and I was the same when I started in 2016, and this was very confronting, and I just thought I became educated, and it's the key to everything, really, isn't it, Ben? You don't know much, but you feel something, so you learn things, and you talk to people who know things. And I mean, one of the key elements that happened to us after the election at the end of 2016 was being invited by the Coroner's Court to put a submission in for the inquiry into Miss A's death. So that was the first time that a residents group, and there was 3 of us, were acknowledged that, there's a voice and you're the missing voice. And people said that to us all the time. You are the missing voice to this. We hear from all the health agencies, the council, the Business Traders Association, but we actually never hear from the residents, So I knew there was a little bit of traction happening. And then you just start talking to people, and people start, So, for example, we had a gathering at a pub, and I got up and spoke about the residents group. Well, I had 10 people come up to me afterwards and say, how can I join up? They didn't know we had, so I had to go out and spread the word about the residents group. So it was very organic, and then people told people, and how it goes. But I never imagined it to be the way it's gone. I mean, I look at it standing here with all that stuff here today. And also that the government's changed its mind. That's pretty insane.
It's amazing.
But the street art you just looked at, that in August, and then the rally, they were the key actions that changed the government's mind. They realised there were votes in it. They realised that people were passionate about it, and they weren't rat bags. And we were getting so much media. And people who are just saying, I've had seasoned journalists down here who've been in the scene for 30 years saying this is such a no-brainer, why hasn't this been done, So we got a lot of fantastic support from really key people who rang me and said Cabinet's changing its mind, and I'm not going to mention their name because I don't want them to, but from the senior networks saying, I don't know if you know, but blah blah blah, because they could all see it, they come down here all the time. So we had great take up from the media, and then the community just support just grew, and it's just one of those things. You sort of put yourself out there, and then things happen. And but it's about being honest. It's about having integrity. As everybody would have said to you, we're totally independent. We don't have any funding from anybody, so we're not answerable to anybody except us. And I think that's been a really, really key advantage. We can say things that I know people would love to say, but they can't. And we've always been really frank and genuine. And the other thing I think it's really interesting, people talk about these campaigns being NIMBYs, these inner city tosses, don't want this, that and the other. But in fact, what we had in our backyards was so bad that we said, look, if the data shows it needs to be where it needs to be and it's near my place, so be it. because having seen what I've seen in Sydney, that is so preferable. So it's really interesting. Nobody said to us, oh, it's just such a typical NIMBY thing, you want it somewhere else. Now we're working with people down in North Richmond to help them come to terms with the fact that it is where it is. But see, the parents at the school, they have said to me, we want it there because what the kids see in the schoolyards is
public transport.
Yeah. So let's clean it up. Anyway, it's all. I think it's also the other thing. I reckon it's just the right thing to do, and just sometimes the right thing is a no-brainer. People go, well, God, we haven't done that, and nothing else has worked. We may as well give it a crack. And I think that's the thing. It is the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm going to move it back a little bit and just ask you, so how long have you lived in the area? And then was there a point when you decided, why did you decide to start campaigning on this issue? Was there a flash moment? Was there a build-up over a number of years of getting frustrated with this lack of people, dangerously...
Living dangerously.
Living dangerously and nothing really being...
So I lived here in 1979 in Elizabeth Street, number 88 Elizabeth Street. It's now Vietnamese dentist. I was a uni student here, and I've always lived in and around this area as a single person. And then I went away for some years. John and I had kids. We got a job in the country, but came back. And when we came back to Melbourne, we wanted to come back here. So we've been living here 6 years now. So we knew that we were coming to a drug-using area. That was fine. I could deal with that, and but you're very aware of it. And so I just found it got increasingly worse in the 6 years that we've been. We moved in 2012, and it just it was really overt. It was everywhere, walking down the street just to do your shopping, getting on the tram to go to work. Just living your life, and you're just confronting this all the time. And I have 3 kids, and I used to think they're all young adults and they live away, but I just thought how glad I was that I didn't have little kids going to school seeing this. It's very confronting, it's really distressing. And anyway, so I noticed it, and I found it distressing. But in July 2016 I had somebody overdosed in my laneway. We've got a laneway on the immediate north boundary of our home, and I just thought, this is just, it was a beautiful sunny July day, and there was this guy overdosed, and I just thought, this is just ridiculous in Melbourne that this is happening. So I called Triple O, blah, blah, blah. But that's when I started thinking about, started doing some serious, for me, research on the internet, checking out supervised injecting centres. So it really piqued my interest in that.
Did he survive?
I don't know, because when they go off in the ambulance, you don't know. So I've been with someone who did die in Victoria Street at the end of May last year. So that was pretty distressing. But anyway, so I did contact my 3 local ward councillors just to say, look, this is just insane. We need to do something, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I knew the elections were coming up in October, and I just thought, look, I'm going to stand as an independent to find out if people care about this. I knew I wouldn't get on because I was self-funded, spent about $1,500, bought some flyers, got about 8 core flutes, got a small team of people. We handed out at the Abbotsford Primary School, and I got over 4% of the primary vote, which I get a refund. So it's an indicator that the VEC sees that as you're being, you're getting quite serious. Yeah, that's right. So that was just a shock. It was a real shock. But that day also, I picked up a lot of people who said to me, in front of, all the other people handing out, this is such an important issue and no one's talking about it. It's the elephant in the room. And the other candidates, whilst really nice people, weren't really pushing this. I mean, the Socialists told me it was their policy, to be their policy for 10 years. They were a bit narky about it. Well, I said, whatever. Yeah. But nothing was happening in it. So I wanted to make it an issue and really put it out there. And that was successful, more than I ever dreamed, Ben. So then, but I didn't get onto council. But then from the people that I'd met on the walking around after work, talking to people around the streets, and also the day of the election, I got enough names and addresses to start thinking, can we get some people together? And I think we could get a movement here. But there were 4 of us that were key, myself and 2 women who live in William Street, Margot and Kylie, and Bill, who I met at the booth, and he used to live in King's Cross with the army, and he said he was there when it was really bad, like it is in Richmond, and he said if he hadn't been there before the injecting centre was established there in 2001, he wouldn't have believed the difference it had made. So he said to me, you're absolutely on the money here, what can I do to help? So he said, I'll email you tomorrow, and he did. So the 4 of us sort of got together in mid-November, and that's what happened. But yeah, it was getting worse, and the stats bear that out. Like the coroner's court just said, it's just ridiculous what's happening in that area. And I suppose another thing too is people talk about honeypots. You set up an injecting centre and you got a honeypot. I mean, people who live here, we've got it. It's here every day. It's just everywhere all the time. It's just no one else would put up with it. No other community would say, that's okay, we're happy just to walk around and close our eyes to that. And, maybe 20 years ago they did, but now they're just saying, no, they're not. And so I think, as you say, as I said before, because it was the right thing to do, and we've tried everything else, it was worth having a crack at it. So now there are still people who are concerned about it. They are fearful of it, but that's where you become educated, and that's why we're here today. Because we actually thought, well, maybe our job's over once we got the legislation passed on the 14th of December. But in fact, we're only sort of up with stage 1, tick. Stage 2 is leading up to the actual opening of the injecting centre and making sure everything we can do to make sure it works and it's fantastic is happening. And then stage 3 is seriously working with the Victoria Street Business Association to renew, to heal this area, because it is it's desperately in need of love. And Melbourne's got some very fussy foodies. People won't come down here. They'll go to Johnson Street, Gertrude Street, Smith Street, anywhere but Victoria Street. Well, we've said to the traders, let's come on. We're your bread and butter. We bring our family and friends here. You need to work with us. We need to work with you, and let's make it great again, And we will. We're going to do that. And I just talked to Richard Wynne, at local MP, down at lunch, and he's organising to appoint somebody to come and work with the group, including the residents and the traders, to change it. I mean, and we can do that.
What was the biggest hurdle in getting through to the traders?
I think for a long time, based on fear, they thought the answer to all their problems was CCTVs. And that's such an easy cop-out that, as you would know, if you've got footage from CCTV, someone's got to be monitoring it. What are you going to do with it? And it was sold to us, and I use that term lightly, as being making people have the perception of safety. Well, I don't want a perception of safety.
I know what it's like every day.
I want to be safe. I want to be clean. I want to be supporting my community. So we really, really needed people to, including the traders, to understand that the way that their patronage will improve will be to make it beautiful again. Because Melbourne people have got an absolute plethora of amazing places to eat. And if I didn't have to come to Richmond, North Richmond, I wouldn't come here either. The way it is, it's shocking. It's gross. And this tram stop number 20 over there, you walk past there and it's just filled with people dealing and using and coming there, and they're running across in front of trams, and look, it's chaos. So for any trader to think that it's okay, well, Economics 101 says that they've got to improve this, because unless they do, they're not going to have patronage increase, the value of their properties will decrease. They've got so much at stake here, so they really do have to work with us. And Mecca Ho, who's the president of Victoria Street Business Association, he and I are working together as sort of the leaders of our organisation to make that happen, and I'm really excited about that, and I think he is too, because he totally gets it.
Fantastic. So Lorraine took me around to see the artwork there, and there's a number of names in the calligraphy. She also told me that a couple of those meant something very special to you. Do you feel like you could tell me anything about
sure. So I have two of my nephews have died of heroin overdoses, one in 1996, he was 21, and the other one died in 2003 and he was 28. And both of them would have survived if they'd used a medically supervised injecting centre. Their mothers are my sisters, and they know and agree with me that, you know, sometimes people, whatever reason they have for injecting substances, but one of them is experimental, one of them, you know, that's part of being a young person and doing that, but you don't want them to die, you know. It's just like if you did something and you overdosed but you were saved and resuscitated, they'd say, listen, if you're in a laneway or you're in a room on your own, you wouldn't have, you know. So I know, and they're both great guys. They were Ewan and Rick are their names, and they're really missed in our family, you know. I mean, Ewan's been dead 22 years, and he was only 21 when he died, you know, and a gorgeous guy, very creative, and so yeah, it was. I mean, I asked both of my sisters before I got involved in this whole thing, how do you feel about it? And they were very supportive, and I also told them about putting their names on the street art, and they said that was fine. Because if you can do anything to prevent anybody else having to go through that, that's a bonus, I suppose. But ultimately, it's for everybody's kids and family. It's just that, you know, if you're going to be risk-taking, if you're kept alive, you can become rehabilitated. And I know the same with, you know, pool deaths. You know, we've got all these regulations for pool fences, and the same with cars, you know, seat belts, and kids have to have 120 hours driving experience and everything now. Well, that's all because it's a risky business, and sometimes people are stupid and do the wrong thing, but you don't want them to die. You want them to live, and Victoria's a leader in those things. You know, we really are amazing that we can do these things and listen to our coroners, which is what was so frustrating about the injecting centre. It's the same thing, really. We saw it through the same lens, and it's really saying, look, it happens, whether you like it or not. What can we do as a community, as a humane society, is to keep people alive, get them off the streets where they're lying in gutters in their own vomit, and get them into some care, treat them with dignity, and, you know, rehabilitate them. So, that's... And I just know that if Rick and Ewan had used injecting centre and lived, they'd still be with us, and... You know, it's just tragic, you know, it's a waste of life.
Yeah, it doesn't need to happen.
It doesn't need to happen, no.
And how important has it been, because especially drug issues in Western countries, I think, can very quickly be dehumanised from the families and the individuals and the lovers and the real people that are affected by something like this. How important was it in your campaign to, I guess, like, rehumanise these stories and give them narratives instead of this narrative of street addicts? It's
really important that to note that our rally in August, was a community rally, and it wasn't a protest rally. It was just a community rally where we did exactly what you said. We destigmatised people. We had people speak at that who'd lost loved ones, and they weren't people that, I don't know, people imagine people who are related to people who have overdose deaths alike, you know, whatever that might be. It happens to many people, and it doesn't discriminate. So that was a really key objective of that rally, and I think that worked. I think a lot of people realised that, you know, people spoke about trying to keep, you know, children or sisters with mental health issues alive, what they did, the lengths they went to, and they still failed in the end, you know, like. So as a community, people can often feel really isolated and they don't want to talk to other people because you might know that my son's got a heroin addiction or whatever. Whereas by bringing it out in the open and talking about it, because it's been destigmatised, is a good thing. And so, like, that happens with Alcoholics Anonymous when people get up and speak that they've got an alcohol problem or their child has or whatever. Well, this is the same thing. And people who say, it's their choice and they've made that decision, Ultimately, that might be the case, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen to you or your family members. So, yeah, I think we've just needed to open up the conversation. So, look, it does happen to everybody. No one, and look, I come from a good family, whatever that means, you know, and we've got two of our beautiful boys are dead. It's just, yeah, it's sobering, and you just know that you want to do it for other people, not to have to go through what we went through and still go through. So, but humanising the faces of people that use drugs illicitly and dangerously and their families is key to this. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go back onto the politics just lastly. Is there any fear for yourself or within the group of an election next year, so this year now, that may have the resulting effect of a government not supporting
hostile
this?
To it,
Hostile to a trial that they don't want to support?
Yes, I don't think anything couldn't be taken for granted. And just looking at his story behind Sydney, when Sydney was set up in 2001, it took them 16 years for that trial to become a permanent centre. And reading the book written by Ingrid Van Beek, who was their first medical director, absolutely chronicled the 6 years of high stakes drama that went on with people, the Fred Nile group, all those people still wanting to close it down, the things they did to you know, it's an outrage. So whilst some people here have said, oh, you know, I'm worrying too much, you know, but I just know that there are people who are very anti. In fact, one of them spoke today, Ms. Inga Powledge. She spoke, and she said, said today, because she's the shadow minister for multicultural affairs, and she actually said, we disagree with it. It's not the way to resolve this issue. So she said in front of everybody here. So there are people out there that would overturn it, dismantle it. So what we need to do, and our group feels very, very strongly about, is that we need it to open, we need it to work, which it should if it's set up properly, and for the community to say you will not be shutting this down because it works.
I'm just on that, I know she's still vehemently opposed to what's going on and has been from the start, even though she was on the committee. Does it frustrate you after that having passed, and taking into account that she didn't take up the offer to travel overseas to inspect countries that do have progressive systems that work effectively? Does it frustrate you when you're here doing this and then just next door you've got to listen to something that has been supported by 48 submissions to the committee that she was on and 2 against, both from religious...
Yeah, ACL and
it's
not
Drug Free
religious,
Australia.
it's a lobby group. They're not religious at all, God.
The ACL and Drug Free Australia, both
you know, it's rubbish, absolute
both
rubbish.
lobby groups. For her to stand opposite Lennox
Stop
Street
20,
and Victoria Street and say that, what goes through your head when you hear that?
Look, I don't know whether it's frustration as much as just it's just more, I take it it's more indicative of how she is as a person. She didn't have too many wins in the parliament last year, Ben. Yeah, she didn't get voluntary assisted dying blown over, and she didn't get this one blown over, and I think she wasn't in favour of the puppy farms legislation going, you know. So I just think she's bitter. She's a bitter person, and I feel sorry for her, really. And I actually shook her hand as I walked in there to the tent this morning, and I had lunch too. I'm not a bitter sort of person. I just think I want to prove to her that it is, get some stats and prove that it's been a decision taken that was right, she was wrong. But I would be frustrated and concerned if the coalition government got into government at the end of this year and did make serious efforts to overturn this centre. And that's why we have to be vigilant. That's why we're in stage 2. And stage 2 is a very interesting stage because we're no longer combative with the government. We're actually now on side of the government. what we now need to do is work with the department to make, and Richard Wynne and other close connected people, to make sure it is just excellent. Look, I just know, and people, as I said, people think I worry too much, but I just know what happened in Sydney, and there are people that just hate this, and they call themselves Christians or a lobby group. It's just and they're on the public teat. It's just pretty shocking. And I suppose the other thing is, if you have an opinion on something, you come to an opinion on something by doing your homework and putting in investigations, you still decide, I don't want that to happen. Look, I really respect that. But I was in the upper house the day of the debate about this on the 14th of December, and honestly, as a taxpayer, I was horrified at the ignorance, the absolute ignorance of people in the upper house on the coalition side, what they said about this. It was embarrassing.
Can you, if you feel comfortable doing so, just because it would have been great to get some audio of Inga, just in terms of showing, I guess, the weight of the arguments tipped, but there are your Inga apologies that are still on the outside. What was her battle cry for this? What was she saying in terms of not agreeing with it? Did she have anything of substance, or was it just a...
Oh, it was anecdotal.
Statement.
She was just saying there was no research supporting it. She just said it will encourage drug taking. It won't prevent drug taking. It won't save lives. She said there are other options, like more CCTVs, more policing, more jails, more locking up, more people in the drug court, more... that really punitive, heavy-handed war on drugs approach, which has been going since the 50s. And how successful has it been? Not. So she just wants to keep doing the same old. And there's absolutely no evidence that any of her suggestions work. And I suppose I'm a bit of an evidence-based person with lots of things, whether it's climate change or... even voluntary assisted dying, all the brouhaha that went on that. Might be 100 people might use that, but it's there in their back pocket if they want to. What right do we have not to do it? The same thing with this. The evidence shows across the world that the war on drugs hasn't worked. The locking them up, all that stuff. You look at Portugal, and Portugal, if you get picked up in a possession of a small amount of illicit substance, you're treated as a patient, you're taken to a health clinic, and you support it. And it's cheaper. I mean, what they're proposing is economic vandalism, because it just means more people in the courts, more people in jail, so let's just build more jails. That's a great idea. Well, that's not the way I want my taxes to work. I'd like 15 medically supervised injecting centres in Melbourne dealing with this stuff, dealing with people that need help, people that have been abused or injured or damaged in some way. Don't just lock them up. There are more drugs in jail than there are in North Richmond, and that's a big statement, So it's just the stupidity of it, it's just ignorance, and that's our biggest battle. It's our biggest battle for traders and residents, some of whom are still against it. It's just saying, look at the evidence. The evidence suggests that this is a way to go, and it's proven successful in so many countries. And so all the people, including Ms. Powlich in the upper house, who opposed it, didn't oppose it based on evidence. It was just this sort of righteous sort of approach, and it just doesn't And when I walk around here and I look at these people. And I just think, God, how would she see you? So there's an inference that I sort of set this up a bit. When I bring MPs and journalists out here and I take them on a tour, of course you'll see overdoses. Who took you? Judy took you. I've set it up or something.
That's the thing that's said between parliamentary members.
Yeah, well, the committee, her committee came out here to do a tour of the area, and I was on one of the tour leaders, and all we do is just go around discreetly and respectfully around to have a look at some of the hot spots. And when we reconvened, this was in June, when we reconvened for lunch, Inga chose not to come on the tour. meeting, going straight to the lunch. And then when Fiona Patton reported that in my group we'd seen 2 overdoses, well, Ms. Powlich rolled her eyes and said, well, of course you would have, well, Judy was your tour leader, and, so like I set them up, and she actually, that's in Hansard too, there's something, she infers that there's all these overdoses, people find them when they're out on tours with local residents, Yeah.
It's quite bizarre.
But it's laughable. In fact, it was funny. It was funny that particular day in June. It was a lunch at North Richmond Community Health, and people, and she quite belittled me, but people came up to me and said, "Oh, you all right?" And I said, "Look, I feel sorry for her." And I do. I really do. I mean, I almost want to take Inga by the hand and just say, "Come with me. Come and sit and listen in my front yard and listen to the people using the laneway next door, and tell me that I've set that up."
There's no reason to shut off like that, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I
Do you does there come a point where, regardless of whether it's a politician or a trader or someone that you're speaking to who's walking past your tent here, does there come a point where you just have to there's going to be 10 or 15% of people that have just made up their mind about this, whatever we say, whatever information we give them, they're not going to change, and we focus on the middle bracket that have not either. Yeah, so you make that decision.
Absolutely. So I respect people if they don't approve of it. That's fine. But I also think that's why we need to get it up. We need to establish it well, based on how it's been done in other countries to make sure it works, and let people see for themselves. I didn't believe this could happen. And the example of Bill, who I met the day of the election, he said to me, if I had not lived in the King's Cross before that injecting centre was set up, and saw what happened afterwards, I wouldn't have believed it. And he said, and I was anti it, I hated junkies and all this sort of language, but he said, I just couldn't believe how good it was, and how I then saw them through a different eyes, that they were going into rehab, they were being cared for, probably for the first time in their lives, So I just think there's a lot of people too, the high incidence of people that perhaps are concerned about it. Wait till August, September this year, when it's been opened, and let's reconvene and see what they say. Politicians too, And this is the other thing about Inga Pulik. We've had 4 coroner's reports in 2017. Jackie Hawkins, Audrey Jammers and Gregory McNamara, and Jackie Hawkins again in November. All of them have said they urgently require the establishment of a medically supervised injecting centre. It was almost our party platform. They were saying, and they keep reiterating it, so, and they do the investigations. We just live here. They do the serious investigations. So that's why, I wanted to say to her, I didn't make this up. I didn't just wake up one day and say, I think I might just go and make a fuss about something. It's actually true, and I live here. You don't. So, look, I'm not frustrated by it. I think we've got a lot of people on side. The government obviously thinks so too, because they've agreed to pass it. It got up in the Parliament, so we'll make sure it works, Ben.
I look forward to seeing it. Unless you've got anything else to say, Judy.
No, but I'll just tell
you as well, before I was saying Lorraine and John, because we're following this lifespan of this setup process. If you're willing to, we'd love to talk to you again in, say, 2 months.
Yeah.
So don't feel like you need to say everything now, because I've got one chance. If you do have some time in 2 months, I'd like to see where you're at and what's gone.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the key thing for us at the moment is we've moved into another stage, and we did not expect that. And now we didn't expect it. But it's a good stage. It's good, but we've got to remain, as I said, vigilant, engaged. We want to be considered serious stakeholders, which I think we are by the government, and we're here for the best interest for the residents and for the people who inject drugs in our laneway. I mean, it's just, they're part of our community. We know a lot of them quite well, actually, and we like them. They're nice people. And I suppose that's the thing. People who inject drugs are nice people. They're not rat bags. They're just people who've had crap in their lives. Well, who hasn't? Anyway, no, that'll do for this moment, for the time. But thanks for your interest. Yeah.
Thank you for giving up your time.
Did I say anything different?